It was a Tuesday in October when everything I thought I knew about my family turned to ash. Not all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you. It doesn't happen like an explosion. It happens like a slow leak, the kind you don't notice until the floor caves in beneath you. My husband Raymond had been quieter than usual that week. Not the kind of quiet that worries you, not at first. Raymond was always the steadiest man in any room. 38 years of marriage, and I could still read him the way you read weather, the set of his shoulders, the way he held his coffee cup. That week he held it with both hands, even when it was still hot. I noticed. I didn't say anything. We'd built something real together. A medical supply distribution company out of Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of business that doesn't make headlines but keeps hospitals running. Raymond had started it in a rented warehouse in 1987 with $12,000 and a used van. By the time her hair had both gone gray, it was worth just over $19 million. We weren't flashy people. We drove sensible cars. We went to the same church we'd gone to since 1991. We had a son named Garrett and a daughter named Sylvie, and we thought we knew who they were. I thought I knew who they were. That Tuesday, Raymond asked me to sit with him at the kitchen table after dinner. He'd sent the housekeeper home early, which he never did. He poured us both a glass of sweet tea, even though it was nearly 9 o'clock, and he knew caffeine kept me up. He said, "Nora, I need you to listen to me carefully." I said I was listening. He said, "I need you to transfer everything from the joint business accounts into the personal account under your name alone. All of it." I set down my glass. We had been talking about retirement. We had been talking about a cruise to Alaska. We had not been talking about this. I asked him what he meant by everything. He said the operating accounts, the reserve fund, the investment portfolio tied to the business. Move it all. Tonight if you can. Tomorrow morning, at the latest. I looked at him for a long moment. Raymond didn't make dramatic statements. Raymond didn't rearrange 19 years of financial structure over sweet tea on a Tuesday night without a reason. I asked him why. He looked at the table. Not at me. At the table. And he said, "Just to be safe, sweetheart. Just to be safe." I did it. I didn't understand it fully, but I did it. Because in 38 years, Raymond had never asked me for something without a reason. He just didn't always share the reason right away. I learned to trust the ask even when the explanation came later. The explanation never came. 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, Raymond collapsed in the hallway outside our bedroom. I heard the sound before I understood what it was. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already somewhere I couldn't reach him. He died at Carolina's Medical Center at 11:47 in the morning. Cardiac arrest. Massive and sudden. The doctor said these things sometimes give no warning. I didn't go home that night. I sat in the hospital parking lot for 2 hours because I couldn't figure out how to put the car in reverse. 38 years, and I didn't know how to leave the building where he'd stopped being alive. My daughter Sylvie flew in from Denver that evening. She held me. She cried with me. She made sure I ate something, even though neither of us tasted it. My son Garrett arrived the following morning. He drove up from Raleigh. He didn't hug me when he came through the door. He kissed my cheek, set his bag down, and said he needed to make some calls. I told myself that was just Garrett. He processed things differently. He always had. I was wrong about what he was processing. On the second day after Raymond died, Garrett sat across from me in my own living room with a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, mid-30s, in a charcoal blazer, with a leather portfolio in her lap. She had the practiced expression of someone who delivers bad news for a living. Garrett introduced her as a financial attorney. I thought he was trying to help me. I thought he was protecting me. That is the thing that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. That my first instinct was gratitude. The attorney opened her portfolio and set a document on the coffee table in front of me. She said she was there regarding the business accounts and the transfer of assets that had occurred in the 72 hours prior to my husband's death. She said there were questions about the validity of those transfers given that my husband had shown signs of cognitive and physical decline. I stared at her. She said that under North Carolina law, there were grounds to contest financial transactions made by an individual whose capacity could be called into question. I looked at my son. Garrett was looking at the wall behind my head. I said. "Garrett, look at me." He looked at me. His face was arranged into something careful and practiced, and I understood in that moment, the way you understand something you've been refusing to see, that this had not been arranged in the past 48 hours. This had been arranged for longer than that, maybe much longer. I asked him what he thought he was doing. He said he was protecting his inheritance. His exact words, "Not the family, not the business. His inheritance." I asked him to leave my house. He didn't leave right away. The attorney said several more things that I didn't fully hear because there was a ringing in my ears that I later understood was grief colliding with rage. She left her card on the coffee table. Garrett picked up his bag. At the door, he turned and said that Raymond hadn't been well for months, and that anyone could see it, and that the transfers I'd made were going to be examined. The door closed. Sylvie was standing in the kitchen doorway. She'd heard everything. Her face was white. She said, "Mom, what just happened?" I said I didn't entirely know yet, but I was going to find out. I called our family attorney that same afternoon, a man named Howard who had handled our estate planning for 11 years and who had known Raymond longer than I had. I told him what had happened. There was a pause on the line, and then Howard said, "Nora, Raymond called me 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. Howard told me that Raymond had come to his office alone, that he'd updated his will, revised the beneficiary structures on 2 life insurance policies, and documented the planned transfer of the business accounts into my name with a signed letter explaining his reasoning, his intent, and the fact that he was of sound mind and full understanding when he did it. Howard had it notarized. Raymond had filed it. Raymond had known something was coming. He just hadn't told me the whole shape of it, because he didn't want me to be afraid. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my own attorney's office, and I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Not just grief. Something older and harder than grief. The specific ache of being loved more carefully than you knew. I don't know exactly when Garrett had started seeing his father as a transaction. I've turned it over in my mind more times than I can count, and I still don't have a clean answer. He had always been ambitious. Raymond had given him a position in the company 8 years ago. Operations manager, good salary, room to grow. Garrett had done fine. Not exceptional, but fine. And somewhere in those 8 years, I think he had started calculating. Started measuring what he would receive. Started deciding, in some quiet and terrible part of himself, that waiting was taking too long. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Garrett had been talking to one of our company's regional account managers, a man who had been with us for 4 years, who Raymond had trusted, who had been providing Garrett with internal financial records he had no business accessing. That came out later, in the investigation. The account manager had been promised a cut. He didn't get it in the end, but he'd been promised. Garrett's wife, a woman I had welcomed into my family, whose children I had sat with in the hospital when they were born, had been the one to find the financial attorney. She had made contact 6 weeks before Raymond died. 6 weeks, while we were still having Sunday dinners, while I was still teaching her oldest daughter how to make my mother's cornbread recipe. I want to pause here because I think people who haven't been through something like this imagine that the betrayal arrives as a single dramatic event. It doesn't. It arrives in layers. Each layer is its own specific kind of devastation. The layer of realizing your child planned this, then the layer of realizing your daughter-in-law was part of it, then the layer of the account manager, then the layer of understanding just how long ago it started. You think you've reached the bottom and then the floor moves again. Howard advised me to retain a second attorney, a litigator. I did. Her name was Beverly, and she was 61 years old and looked like somebody's favorite aunt and operated in a courtroom like someone who had never once lost her footing. She reviewed everything Raymond had prepared, the notarized letter, the updated beneficiaries, the documented transfer authorization, and she told me, quietly and directly, that Raymond had built me a fortress. Garrett's legal team filed a challenge to the transfers. They argued diminished capacity. They hired a medical expert who had never treated Raymond to suggest that his cardiac event indicated prior deterioration. Beverly dismantled it methodically. Raymond had a full physical 8 weeks before he died. Clean bill of health, minus slightly elevated blood pressure, which he was managing with medication. His physician testified. Howard testified. Two of Raymond's longest business partners testified about a meeting they'd had with him the week before he died, in which he had been sharp, detailed, and entirely himself. The challenge failed. Garrett's attorneys had also filed a motion related to the business accounts, claiming that as a part owner, he held a small percentage stake Raymond had gifted him years earlier. He had rights that superseded my authority as surviving spouse. Beverly and Howard together showed that the stake was non-voting, non-controlling, and specifically structured to exclude Garrett from any claim on the primary operating assets. Raymond had structured it that way in 2019. 3 years before any of this happened, Raymond had known, not the specifics maybe, but he had known the shape of what his son was capable of, and he had quietly, methodically, over years, made sure I was protected. The account manager was terminated and faced a civil suit. Garrett and his wife faced legal costs that I was told exceeded $400,000. The challenge was dismissed in full. The assets remained in my name. My son called me once after the dismissal. He said he hoped I understood that he'd had to try, that there was too much at stake for him to just accept what had happened. I told him that his father had been dead for less than 2 weeks when he walked into my living room with a lawyer, that Raymond's hands had not yet cooled, and that whatever he thought he'd had to do, that moment was going to live between us for the rest of our lives. He said he was sorry. I didn't say anything. I hung up. Sylvia and I don't talk about Garrett much now. It sits between us at the dinner table sometimes. The shape of him. The absence of what he was supposed to be. She's angry in a way I haven't allowed myself to be. Maybe because one of us needs to hold it and one of us needs to keep moving. I keep moving. That's what I know how to do. I sold the business 14 months after Raymond died. A group out of Atlanta acquired it. Fair price, fair terms, and the employees, most of whom had been with us for years, were kept on. I think Raymond would have approved. He built it to last, not to be clutched. I live in the same house. I go to the same church. I still make my mother's cornbread at the holidays, though the holidays are quieter now. My grandchildren, Sylvie's kids, come for Christmas and fill the house with noise in a way that makes it possible to breathe. I keep Raymond's reading glasses on the nightstand. I don't know why. I just do. People ask me sometimes what I want others to take from this. They want a lesson, a clean moral, something they can carry out the door. I understand that. We all want the story to mean something portable and clear. What I can tell you is this. Raymond didn't talk to me about what he was afraid of because he didn't want me to carry that fear with him. He protected me from the knowledge while he quietly built the walls. Some people might say that wasn't fair to me, that I deserved to know, and maybe they're right. But I know Raymond, and I know he would have said he handled the part he could handle, so that I wouldn't have to. I think about that Tuesday night. The sweet tea. Both hands around the cup. The way he looked at me when he said just to be safe. He had known something. He had acted. He had loved me in the most practical, steady, unglamorous way possible. By sitting in a lawyer's office on a Wednesday afternoon and making sure that whatever came, I would be standing when it was over. I am standing. The money never mattered the way Garrett thought it did. That's the part he never understood about his father. Raymond worked hard because he believed in building something, not because he was storing something up for someone else to take. The business was never about the number at the end. It was about the work itself, the people, the doing of it day after day for 30-some years. You can't transfer that. You can't contest it in court. You can't put it in a portfolio or walk into someone's living room and demand your share of it. Garrett has 2 children who will grow up knowing what their father did. I wonder about that some nights. Whether they'll understand it when they're old enough to ask. Whether they'll forgive him. Whether he'll forgive him. Whether he'll forgive himself. I don't spend too much time on it. Raymond would have told me not to. He would have said, "Nora, look forward. You've got things left to do." So that's what I do. I look forward. The house in the morning before the day starts, the grandchildren at Christmas, the church pew on Sundays that still has a slight indentation on the left side from 33 years of Raymond sitting in the same spot. Some things hold. Even after everything, some things hold. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. more time than I ever wanted. And the thing I keep coming back to isn't the money. It isn't the court filing or the $400,000 Garrett burned through trying to take what Raymond had built. It isn't even the image of my son standing in my living room 2 days after his father died, looking at the wall behind my head while a lawyer read documents at me. What I keep coming back to is cause and effect, plain and simple. Raymond spent 38 years making decisions that were honest. He paid people fairly. He built contracts that held. He sat in a lawyer's office and quietly made sure I'd be protected, not because he was afraid, but because he understood that the choices you make in private are the ones that define everything in the end. Nobody saw him do any of that. There was no audience. He did it because it was right, and because he loved me, and because that's who he was. Garrett spent years making a different kind of decision. Quiet ones too, but in the opposite direction. Taking financial records he wasn't supposed to have. Making promises to a man who trusted our family. Planning legal action while still sitting at our Sunday dinner table. Nobody saw him do that either. But both sets of choices, Raymond's and Garrett's, arrived at exactly the destination they were always headed toward. Raymond's protected me. Garrett's destroyed him. That's what I want people to understand when they hear this story. Not that bad things happen to bad people in some neat, tidy way. Life isn't always that clean. But that character isn't what you perform for the people watching. It's what you do in the rooms where no one's keeping score. Raymond knew that down to his bones. Garrett never learned it. I think about Garrett's children sometimes. They're going to grow up. They're going to be old enough to ask questions. And I genuinely hope, that somewhere in the wreckage of what their father chose to do, they find enough clarity to build something different for themselves. The capacity to be better than the worst thing in your family history is one of the most important things a person can develop. I had to find that too, in my own way, with my own family. Sylvie asked me once, not long after everything was settled, whether I was angry. I told her I was something more complicated than angry. I was grieving Raymond and grieving Garrett at the same time, and those two griefs felt nothing alike but lived in the same chest. She nodded. She understood. What keeps me upright isn't bitterness. It's the work, the choosing, every day, to be someone who Raymond would recognize, someone who handles hard things without becoming hard. That takes more effort than most people admit. Some mornings it takes everything I have just to get to a place where I can function with any kind of grace. But I do it. Because Raymond did it. Because Sylvie is watching. Because somewhere inside me there is still the woman who built something real alongside someone who believed in doing things the right way. And I am not going to let what Garrett did be the last word on who this family is. The $19 million is still mine. The business found a good home. And I still sit in the same church pew on Sunday mornings, slightly to the right of the indentation Raymond left in the cushion. Some things hold. If you let them.